Hello, and bienvenidos to this episode of Voces, the official Hola at IBM podcast that brings our Hispanic and Latino communities of IBM together to share authentic, accessible, and informal conversations, amplifying critical leadership messages on culture, career, well-being, business, and technology. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to those of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of IBM.
Hi, welcome to Voces. I'm Clarissa Stam, and today's episode we are joined by Alan Torres. Alan, thank you for being here. We're looking forward to the first episode of 2023. I don't want to steal your thunder, so I wanted to give you a little bit of space to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and where you come from, your heritage, and maybe a little bit about your story. So could you share that with us?
Awesome. Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you to anybody who's listening to this. I think it's really important to have visibility, right? Being outspoken, support the community. So my name is Alan Torres. I'm the diversity and inclusion leader for the Hispanic community at IBM. I've been in the role for a little bit over a year now. I'm originally from Mexico. I came to the U.S. when I was 13, and I've been here ever since. I've always been in Texas, and here's where I graduated high school. I went to the University of Texas in Arlington, and that's where I got my degree in information systems management. I think I was 27 when I got my degree. So you did ask, tell us a little bit about yourself or your story, so I'm going to do that. This is not a story that I was comfortable telling up until about 2 years ago, maybe. Right, but I'm a DACA recipient. So for those who may be listening outside of the U.S., DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is a program in the U.S. that grants it's not immunity, and it's a temporary protection from deportation for some of those that were brought to the U.S. When we were children, right, without having gone through the process. So anyways, I'm one of the around 700,000 people in the US who is a DACA recipient. So like I mentioned, I graduated college when I was 27. So I'm a geriatric DACA recipient. I know that normally when you think about DACA, they paint the picture of children and students, etc. And by and large, they are that. But I was, I think, 26, 27 in 2012, I think, when DACA went into effect by President Barack Obama. And funny thing is that I was going through college, right? I graduated high school in 2004. So if I didn't graduate until 2012, I gone to college long enough to almost be a doctor. But the truth of the matter is, I couldn't apply for financial aid. I couldn't get any loans, because you needed to be to have a social security number to do all that, and I didn't. So I was working. I spent the first half of my adulthood or my 20s working at restaurants or bars, right? And that's how I paid for college, and I paid for classes one at a time or two, going through summer school, trying to catch up. And honestly, I was just doing it to put the degree on the wall, which is right behind me now, right? And I figure, I don't know what the future holds, but I got to do something with my time. I might as well, take a gamble on myself, even if I'm never able to use my degree. I'll have kids one day, and I want to hold them to a higher standard. So I may go ahead and do it. So lucky for me, I had that lucky break. DACA came into effect. I quit within a couple of weeks of getting DACA, my restaurant job, my bartending job, and as they say, the rest is history.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing, Alan. That's and what I would qualify you, and I'm sure a lot of people know this who are part of the DACA program. You're a dreamer, right? You started as you came to this country at a very young age, not knowing what this country was all about, and you dreamt of a better life, and that's very inspirational. And I think a lot of us, me being born in the United States, not much different, right? I have parents who spoke Spanish and didn't understand, how to navigate the United States system, so I had a little bit of a learning curve myself. So it's inspirational. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have gone through that too, working, night jobs, dead end jobs, just to get that degree on the wall. And it's so inspiring. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. So what actually kind of evolved in your career? Now you got your degree, how did you get into IBM, or how did you start working in corporate life? And then how did that evolve into now a DNI officer for the Hispanic community?
The thing that I love that we're doing this little like podcast interview profile thing, whatever we call it, is that I have the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth, right? Because some of the stories I share in the past, but you polish them up a little bit and you just give the highlights so that you can deliver the message within the allotted time, right? But I've always said I snuck into IBM through the back door, right? And I said that up until very recently. And I think there was a little bit of imposter syndrome going on with that. But also, like, I really truly felt that way, right? So I'll pick up where I left off. I got my degree in hand, and there was this lady, and I think it's really important, right? Because I see this theme in my life of sponsorship. There was so I went through college because one of the people I was working for in a restaurant, he was an immigrant himself, Mohamed Abdel Hadi, right? And he said, "Come on, you got to do something with your life, man. We're gonna go enroll you in community college." I didn't know how to do it. It sounds completely simple and doable, and I didn't even have a computer at home, right? So he showed me that, and then the same thing happened kind of when I got my DACA documentation. There was this lady. She didn't know my status. She just knew I worked at the bar where she used to go for happy hour once in a while. And at the time, she was the manager for a technology company, right? And it just so happens that they work developing the software for a restaurant, right? The point of sale system. And so she says, "Hey, look, I see you're a hard worker. You're here all the time. I like your attitude. I want to give you a job." And I think she was nagging me to interview or to apply for a job for a little bit over a year. But I couldn't tell her, "Hey, I can't because I don't have the paperwork." So I didn't. But one day she comes in. I mean, it was serendipity. I don't know if you're religious, Clarissa. I'm up in the air about it, but definitely, those are the kind of things that make you wonder. So my documentation arrives in the mail. I apply, it shows up in the mail. That same week, this lady's telling me, "Hey, listen, I'm tired of getting excuses from you. I've already spoken to your restaurant, to your manager from the restaurant. You have Tuesday off, and I'm expecting you in my office at noon. You're coming in for an interview. So no excuses." So I went and I took the interview just because I didn't want to expose myself, right? I didn't want to have that uncomfortable conversation of saying, "I don't have the documentation, I'm here illegally, or undocumented." So I did that, and then, I figure I'm not gonna get it anyway, so I'll go embarrass myself, I'll get it over with. And as I'm wrapping up the interview and I'm driving home, I was living at my parents' house at the time. Here is this very official envelope from the U.S. Customs Immigration Services, USCIS, and I opened it up. I mean, I've never seen one in my life before, right? And I opened it up and I see this, "Congratulations, you've been approved," right? It looks like this letter that looked almost like a college diploma. And I said, "Your documentation is going to be arriving in the next couple of days." And I honestly, I took that, I cried. I was ecstatic. I felt like I won the lottery. I did. So I did that job, and they treated me really well in that job, right? That's the first job. I think your first job is always hard in the corporate world, especially if you don't know what you're doing, if your parents don't come from a corporate environment, because they can't help you, right? They don't know how to tell you, "Hey, this is what you want to do on the first day. Hey, you may want to go shake hands with your managers. Hey, you may want to get to know your team. You may want to bring donuts or bagels." Hell, the lady who hired me, she bought donuts for me to bring to the office, right? So again, that sponsorship and someone looking out for you. I think I did that for about a year or two, and then I got another job through a friend. He went from he started working in the tech world too, and he says, "Hey, I really like my company. It's in downtown Dallas. It's very fun. You need to apply." So I did, and I did that, right? I was still in the tech sector. I got a job at this utilities company, And that was the first company, right? I mean, it was really my second job, but it was the first place that I was in a corporate environment where there was a lot of Latinos or Hispanics around me, right? And by a lot, I mean, it was like 5, including me.
Yeah.
But it felt like we had a little community and I had a lot of fun. So fast forward, I was happy there. I was having a lot of fun. Um, and I really enjoyed what I was doing, right? And I was upskilling and learning new stuff. And I was, growing as a professional. But one of my coworkers, he says, "Hey, listen, there's this place that is hiring IBM, for Watson Health, and they're making a big investment, yada yada yada. You need to go apply." So I did. I went during my lunch hour. I got hired on the spot. I think it was the last day that they were doing hiring, and I did that for a couple of years, right? So, but anyways, that's how I came to IBM.
So very similar. Now we're looking to really bring in people that have that, I wouldn't even say degrees. I said that spirit, that enthusiasm, that strength that can make IBM stronger and more innovative, right? So, and I think your sponsor in the very beginning of your first job actually saw that in you, Alan. So that's amazing that's how you got in. And it's probably a lot of how IBMers do have come in over the years. So, but now tell me, so you came into IBM, and then how did you get from an entry level job at IBM through a growth spurt to now being the DNI officer? What inspired you to actually build a practice around this community, right? This Hispanic community.
Yeah. So listen, I hear someone say often, you have to be really intentional, right? And normally people don't wake up and they won the Super Bowl, and you don't wake up and all of a sudden you're the CEO of a corporation. It happens with a lot of intentionality. Um, However, for me, I've been incredibly lucky, right? I have to admit that I've been really lucky. Um, I work hard, but I had a lot of sponsors every step of the way, and sometimes I didn't even know it, right? That people were looking out for me. And this is around 2018, right? So I've been on the job for a year, maybe two. I got hired in 2016. So to put the historical events into context, that's when we got a new president here in the U.S., right? We got 45 coming into the office. And he was very vocal about his immigration policy. So there was, around that time, there was a push to say, hey, this DACA, this deferred action for childhood arrivals / dreamers, I'm going to get rid of it, right? And I'm going to get rid of it. And I want Congress, if Congress wants to fix it, they're going to fix it. And again, I'm not going to take political sides here. That's not the point of the story, but that's what was happening, right? There was a lot of talks that this program was coming to an end.
Yeah, so you're setting the tone.
Exactly. Yeah. So I walk into the office morning and my phone starts ringing and pick it up. And someone starts going like, hey, we know, Alan, we know who you are. I work for the government and policy office here at IBM. And my heart's beating really hard because I'm feeling, oh my gosh, I've been exposed, right? They're about to fire me. They're about to tell me, we have to get rid of you. The laws are changing. I don't know. To my surprise, that's not what happened, right? They tell me, hey, listen, we got you. We're with you. We're very aware of what's happening. We're gonna continue to update you about the situation. We have people in Washington who are paying a lot of attention, right? We have an office dedicated to this type of issues. And I'm not saying much. The entire time I just said, yes, And you know how we are, we Latinos. I'm thinking, I'm not about to incriminate myself. I'm not giving them nothing.
Exactly.
They asked me, is it okay if we get in touch with you again in the future to give you updates and, if any opportunities come up? I was thinking, opportunities? What kind of opportunities? Sure, you can call me. And I hung up and I was trying to get off the phone as quickly as possible.
Of course,
so about a week or two go by. Yeah, about a week or two go by. And I get an email and, it's basically like, hey, I'm back. And this time I brought the entire legal team. And which is something that IBM does really well, right? Our attorneys. And they basically said, hey, listen, there's a handful of others like you here at IBM. We want to support you. IBM has a long history of diversity and inclusion. This was the first time I was hearing about it, right? Or at least seeing it. And they said, listen, first of all, if any of you, right, and they didn't disclose who we were because it's confidential, yada, yada. First, they asked for permission. Can we set up a meeting between you guys for you to have a support group? And then they said, if any of you need legal advice, if you want to meet with an attorney, here we are, right? Or we'll pay for somebody else that you're comfortable with, like out of our pocket. Let us review your situation. I was very clear about my situation, right? I knew there was no path forward. I was reading the news every day. I was self-educating on this. But the other thing that came up is they said, would you be willing to go to Washington, D.C. and advocate for yourself in front of Congress and the Senate, et cetera, et cetera? So I said, yeah, sure, why not? And at the time, I was a little nervous, but I figured, hey, not a whole lot of people get a shot like this. I'm going to do it because my sister was going through the same thing. She's a lot younger than I am. And she was still in school. And I said, if I don't do it for myself, I got to do it for my sister. People like my sister. So anyways, that completely turned it around for me. So in my mind, I figure I'm going to see this thing through. There's probably going to be another 6 months of this being a hot issue. And then I'll find a new job. Well, I didn't get a chance to do that because while this was happening, our local office had been downsized. We're getting ready to go for one last launch as a team, and I get a phone call, and it was an executive from Watson Health, right? IBM Watson Health, and that executive basically said, "Hey, Alan, on such and such, and Mr. Big Wig here at IBM, I know that you received some bad news this morning, but I know about your story. I want to help you, and I got a job ready for you in Austin, Texas, right? Which team would you like to join?" And that was the first time that I think I got gutsy here at IBM, because before I could just get my head down and I did my work, and I was grateful for the opportunity.
Like most of us. Like
exactly,
most of
a
us.
cultural thing.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, Mr. Wighead, thank you very much for the opportunity, but if you really want to help me, I don't want to do this anymore. I want a career in sales, right?
Okay.
And the reason for that is some of the other DACA recipients I met, they were doing sales, and it was a lot more lucrative, right? And I like the fact that they were able to travel, and it seemed like a lot more fun of a job at the time.
Yeah.
So I did that, and so that's how I transitioned from software development to sales. I did, and I said that very loosely. I did sales for a year and a half, 2 years. I continued to participate in opportunities with D&I on the side, and then as luck would have it again, I get this opportunity, and again, the DACA issue was very a hot button issue again, right? But I had a kid on the way at this time. My first one was on the way. I wake up one morning and well, let me backtrack a little bit. I started volunteering with the Hispanic Executive Council, right? That's something that we have here at IBM.
Yeah.
For 8 different communities, so Hispanic, Black, Native American, LGBTQ+, veteran, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I started volunteering with the Hispanic Executive Council, and an opportunity came up through that. One of the executives was looking for someone to be a chief of staff, right? Which here at IBM or some other places, it's almost like an opportunity to groom you for leadership.
Sure, yeah.
And so, I mean, I was thrilled when they said, "Hey, we're looking at you for this position. Are you interested?" And I said, "Are you sure you got the right Alan Torres? Because we got a couple here at IBM." They said, "Yeah, we got the right one." And I said, "Why me?" Right? And they said, "Well, just you've proven yourself, right? Like, that's what the manager told me. Gina Ayala Claxton. She said, I like what you're doing. I like your passion." Said, I don't know if I'm good enough. Again, that imposter syndrome.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm good enough. And she says, I think you are. It could be a stretch assignment, but I got you. And I'm gonna invest in you, right? You need to invest in yourself if you want to do it. So I took the job. And again, right, this theme of sponsorship showing up. But I want to make something really clear. Every time this theme of sponsorship shows up, it wasn't just sponsorship. It wasn't someone just saying, I'm going to give you an opportunity because you're brown and you have an accent. It was
Right.
someone saying, hey, you're working really hard for me. You need to go to school because you're young. I'm going to help you. Hey, you're working really hard and you're going to school. I need someone like that in my team. I'm going to hire you. Hey, you've been working really hard here and you're volunteering on top of it. And I like what you're doing. I'm going to give you a chance. Right. So so that's something that I always try to tell people who reach out to me and say, how can I do this? How do you do it? Etc. You don't know. You just go in blindly and you do different things and you volunteer and you work hard and you're vocal about it, and then you jump at the opportunity whenever it's
Well,
presented itself.
that's what I love about what you're saying, because you found opportunities within IBM, and IBM is a huge company. We have so many types of jobs that you can get into. So if you're not happy with something, you may not be able to move into the next role right away, but find those opportunities where you can take a project on, volunteer, something that would kind of excite you and make the job a little bit more worth it. And you found opportunities out of that. You connected with the right people, you connected with future sponsors, people saw your value, and they gave you another opportunity that actually turned into a contributing paying role to your life. So
Yeah.
that's an amazing part of this company. I've been with IBM 25 years, so I've seen that all across the board, and I stayed here because of that, right? So yeah, no, that's great.
Thank you for
That's
setting
awesome.
that up, because indeed what I was doing is I was networking and I was developing my brand before I even knew what that was, right? And so
Right.
that's something that we're working to try to teach the younger generation with the community members here. Like, hey, you got to develop your brand, and you got to network, and you got to find sponsors, and you got to find mentors. And the answer is, it sounds easy. It's never easy, right? And you never know who they're going to be either, right? You have to be
Right.
really intentional about it. And then there's also like that certain chemistry factor that has to come into play. Not everyone is going to
Exactly.
like you. You're not going to like everyone. Sometimes it's not a good fit. But for me, really, those were the determining factors. And then this final job that I'm in now, same thing, right? They said the role became available, and I'm going to wrap it up here because I'm running long, but the job became available. And I went to my manager at the time and I said, hey, look, here's a list of 3 or 4 people that I think could be really good for the community. Like, we should nominate them to apply for this job. And she says, okay, thank you. I'll take a look at it. And she comes back a couple of days later and she says, why not you? Right. And again, I said, I don't think I'm good enough. Will I be a good sponsor for the community? Right. And she basically said, in a very kind way, but she basically said, put your money where your mouth is. Right.
Yeah.
And so I did. And, I was sharing this with a group yesterday. My wife asked me last night, what kind of person are you going to be in 2023? Right? Because she's seen me go through this role in 2022, and she's seen me go up to her sometimes and say, I am exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted. I need to go for a run, or I need to go take a nap, or I think I'm coming really close to quitting, or, there's this community member who's having this issue. I don't know how to help them. So she was asking me, are you going to wear your job on your sleeve in 2023, or are you going to try to differentiate between your family life and your job? Right. And I looked at her. I was a little surprised. I was a little upset. Right? And I said,
Yeah.
I just don't know how to do my job without wearing it on my sleeve. For me, this is personal. For me, I see myself in the community members, whether they were born here or somewhere else. For me, a lot of these issues are issues that I've been through. Right. And I said, honey, in 2023, get ready, because I'm going to be another emotional roller coaster. 2023 is not going to be any easier. It's going to be harder. But that's how I ended up here, and that's how I'm doing what I'm doing.
Well, I admire your dedication to the community, and I thank you for it. And I'm sure on behalf of hundreds of Hispanics that are within the company, hopefully we can call it thousands. We thank you for that. And so let me switch. Let me switch over to the next, I guess, the part of our agenda. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our community, right? So you described a lot of personal challenges where I saw you held up a mirror for me, right? So I saw the same challenges in my own career. And I'm sure there's tons of other people listening to this podcast that have also experienced the same things. So what is one thing that you see for our community that is a challenge? What do we do that we could probably do better tomorrow?
Yeah, so I didn't come up with this one, but fragmentation, right? One of our partners, Claudia Romo Edelman, the CEO of the We're All Human organization, she has a whole presentation around Latinos, Hispanics being fragmented, right? So I think it's fragmentation plus a couple of other things. I think it's fragmentation plus too much talking, not enough action. Fragmentation plus a lack of understanding of what the real issues are, right? And then how do we operationalize the action items to fix those issues or to try to solve them or mitigate them. And the final one, I think, is a lack of understanding from the community of a real impact and a real power, right? Because there's again some of that imposter syndrome going on, or lack of understanding in general. And let me give you some very quick examples. I wrote this down because I'm preparing something else, and it's been in my mind. But I'm gonna look at them real quick. Because listen, these are some of the things that I have heard in the last couple of months from community members that have shared with me, or I heard them directly. Why do you guys call Hispanics at IBM? Does that include Latinos? Yes, right? Hispanics and Latinos is our group here at IBM. And I think anytime you hear the Hispanic Latino term, does that include the Brazilian community? Yes, we are being advocates for everyone. Does that include people who were born in the US? Yes. Hispanic, right? Hispanic is not a race, it's a ethnic group, right? And it encompasses over 20 countries, right? And 17. So yeah, in fact, 68% of the people who are under the Hispanic Latino umbrella were born in the US, right? 20% or 20% were not born in the US and are not naturalized, and the remainder of them were born outside and naturalized. The other thing that I've heard is this is people that have shared with me, when they're saying, hey, I'm dealing with this personal challenge, some of the misconceptions about the community from others. But you are so smart, sometimes I forget you are Latino.
Wow. Okay.
How can you belong to that group? Are you Hispanic? Because you don't have an accent. Not all of us have an accent. And another one that I have heard from someone who was, Hispanic or Latino, this group is racist. I don't want to be part of this group because it's racist, and I think it's illegal, and I don't know how you guys can have a group for Hispanics and Latinos. Don't contact me, right? And so there is all of this, and I'm sharing this information because there is all this identity conflicts, and there is all this information coming at us, right? And sometimes we try to make sense of it, and we don't know how. So anyways, I think that's one of the challenges, and education and data and facts are the way to combat that.
Yeah, and I totally 100% agree. I mean, I think the fragmented part of your first point, I see that, I mean, coming from a biracial marriage, I see that even within my own family dynamic. And it's so important for us to come together as a community so that we can, in the words of high tech, pull up, push up, right? So that we can bring others forward and be able to help sponsor others as well. So let me ask one quick question for you before we move into a little bit more about what do you see as the one thing that Hispanics bring to the table, and then what is your big inspirational goal for the community?
Yeah, so I was talking about knowing some of the data, or knowing some of the understanding the challenges and understanding our impact, right? And if you're someone who's following some of the work that we're doing here inside of IBM, or you're a member of the World Human Organization, or High Tech, or ASER, or ASE, or SHIP, or any of the many Hispanic-oriented organizations, you probably hear some of these numbers, right? But we're the fastest growing community in the US. 51% of the population growth this decade has been Hispanic or Latino, right? We're 28% of the K through 12 student population right now, which is 100% growth since 1996, right? So we went from 14% to 28%. That means we're the future.
Mhm.
That's right. We're the youngest community. 6 out of every 10 Hispanic or Latinos are under the age of 35, younger than I am. And get this other statistic that really impressed me. We are going to be contributing out of the 12.3 million overall workforce impact that we're supposed to have, like jobs or workforce growth for this decade, right? So the projected growth is supposed to be 12.3 millions. Latinos are going to make up around, or projected to be 10.7 millions of that, right? So our growth, our workforce impact when it comes to being the workforce of America, and also the consumers, frankly, right? Whenever you look at us as Latinos as a economics, we are the fifth. We would be, if we were a country, we would be the fifth largest economy in the world. That's only Latinos inside the U.S. We're not talking about
That's
the
amazing.
Latinos anywhere else, right? So that's huge. I mean, if you're not investing in Latino, if you're a business right now, you're not investing in Latinos. If your marketing strategy doesn't include Hispanics, if your workforce or your succession plans don't include Latinos, then I don't know what you're planning to do in the next 10, 20, 30 years.
Well, I love what you're saying because, a lot of times people speak about our passion, how we put our heads down to the business, and that's great. I think a lot of cultures do that, and we do bring that to the table. But we're a force, right? We are a force, and you cannot deny the metrics and the statistics. So
Yeah,
we are going to be one of the largest workforce. So it is.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but the way that one of my
Ahead.
friends describes it is we are the sleeping giant and the giant is awake, right? You probably heard one of our leaders, Jesus Mantas, and he was just recently saying, I'm hoping and I have a feeling that 2023 is going to be the year of the Latino, right?
Mhm.
I hope so. And we've been making a ton of noise, right, as a community, and I hope that we are indeed awake, right? And we're ready. You've also asked me what are the goals for
What
2023,
is
right?
your aspirational goal
My
for the community?
aspiration, yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to take credit for this one because I didn't come up with it, right? This is in partnership with some of the executives that I'm working with that are leading the way. But we set a very bold goal here inside of IBM. And I know that this is going to be shared externally, right? So we're only going to be sharing stuff that IBM publishes their underrepresented community numbers every year. You can look them up online. You can just Google IBM diversity and inclusion or IBM ESG report, and you can find the numbers, right? So our number last year as a community in the US, we were 6.8% of the workforce at IBM, Latinos, right? So, and you can go back. We published the numbers for the last 3 years. So, we were a little bit less and we grew a little and we grew a little and we grown a little. And that's good, but I think it's time to grow a lot. So
Yeah.
what we want to do is we want to go faster and we want to go bigger. So our goal is going to be to get to 9% in the next 2 years. It sounds like well, you're going to go from 6.8 or 7% to 9%. It's not a lot, but really it's just under 30% growth, right? So
Yeah.
so that's one of my aspirations. I really want to be able to, whenever I'm done with my role, or I look back and say we did something meaningful, right? So that's a broader, bolder goal. There's some other personal ones. I want to continue to have more impact. I mean, for me, it's always a good problem when I'm having to select people for volunteerism or nominations for opportunities, and I have a deep bench, because that means that I have a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that are being active and engaged in the community. And I think we've done a really good job at that, right? And that's not just me. That's a symptom of the culture, and
Yeah.
I want us to amplify on that. We have a lot of young Latinos inside of IBM right now who are ignited and have a passion for this and are taking it very personally, and who are showing up every time we ask them to, and they're paying it forward and pushing up or pulling
Yep.
up.
Yeah. And so I've gotten two things out of that, right? The first thing is you want to grow to double digit, which is a milestone, right? And that's going to be very hard to do. But the fact that we have so many young Latinos in this community, and these are future leaders of IBM, right? So we have that amazing opportunity to pull them up into these leadership positions and open the door for the next generation to come and to expand it and for more leaders to kind of build into that seat. So we have the room at the table. Now we got to fill those seats, right? So I love it. I love it. So let me bring it back for a little bit. And so what makes you think that you can get to that success and measurement? I know you can't really talk about next year's 2023 goals specifically, like the targets you want to hit, but how do you feel that you'll be able to measure that success?
Yeah, great question. I think so number one, right? I want to be really clear about one thing. And I think I said it earlier during our conversation, but what we're doing in D&I, right? We're not trying to promote people again just because they're Black or because they're Hispanic or because they're a woman or whatever have you, right? That's not what we're advocating for here. And I don't think we would want that anyways. What we're advocating for is having an equal opportunity to fight for an opportunity or for a role, right? Having being in the same equality of situation as anybody else, right? That's what we're advocating for here. How do we track that? There's a couple of things that we're doing that we're measuring, and this is across the D&I community here at IBM, right? We looked at IBM has a survey every year where we measure employee engagement and inclusion index, right? We come up with these different dimensions where we measure how people are feeling about those, and we run that survey, right? And we, by the way, I just got the results for this year, and we grew, as a community, which is good. But that's a quick pat on our back and good job. Let's go and do better next year. And then what real impact is it having? But that's one of our measures, right? Are we impacting the inclusion and engagement index for the community? The other one would be we're measuring headcount, like I mentioned, right? Those numbers get published, but we're going to be tracking that quarter over quarter, and then we're even drilling down to the business units, and we're looking at what business units are doing good versus which ones are having issues. And then this is something we did this year. We had some conversations with the senior vice presidents of those business units, raising awareness, right? Do you know your numbers? Do you know that you're doing really well here versus you could be doing better here? And by the way, this is what we're doing as a council, right? And this is how you could engage with us. Can we help you do better? So that's another one that we're doing. We're tracking the headcount. We're also tracking the number of different indexes, such as promotions. We're always looking at attritions as well. I know that's a very sore subject for my leaders. So I won't get into too many details, but it's no secret all companies were having issues during the pandemic, keeping their talent, right? And again, our job, my job, I'm never going to look at a Hispanic here at IBM and say, you got a better opportunity, don't go. I'll say, hey, you got a better opportunity, go, take us with you.
Yeah.
Right. Our job is to say, how can we improve? How can we make IBM a place for you to where your career can continue to grow, your personal and professional goals. And that's really hard to do, right? Especially when we're not impacted. I don't have any real power here. I don't have the power to get somebody a raise. I don't have the power to get somebody promoted. I don't have the power to get somebody on another team. That's the challenge within my role. It's influential, right? So I leverage people like yourself, Clarissa. We were sitting in about a month ago, having a conversation, right? And I leverage people like yourself sometimes, and I say, hey, I don't know how to work that problem. I don't know how to have that conversation with that manager, but I know someone who might, right? Why don't you go talk to Clarissa? Hey, I don't know how to jump from what you're doing to this other career, but I got 2 or 3 people who may, right? And then just saying, hey, I don't know how to do that, but this is how you may want to set up that call with your manager this way. And if you need help, let me know. So anyways,
so it's all about that networking, right? I mean, that's been so crucial around trying to, like you said, I don't have any purchasing power at IBM, but I do have the ability to influence, someone into if I feel that there is someone that is worthy of a role or a job opening. So I can ask, hey, take a look at that person. There's somebody there that'd be interesting. And that's the best we can do. But I love that you're is around that, and that entire, view of we're still helping people that can create a diversity of thought within IBM. So it's good. I love it. So let me switch back a little bit and kind of round this out and end on a good note. What are you most optimistic for in 2023? I know you had mentioned earlier that you want to grow the numbers and that, you want to bring more Latinos into the community, but you personally, what are you optimistic for next year?
The community itself. I mean, when you look at the Hispanic Latino population and you look at our superpowers, I think our number one superpower is the power of our stories, right? I had this conversation with our senior vice president, Dario, about 6 months ago, and he said, what is the number one thing, right? What is the one thing that the community has going for itself right now, or that we can tap into? The power of our stories. I don't think you're going to run out of people to bring onto this podcast, frankly, because we have so many people with amazing stories. And so I get motivated, and I'm looking forward to, because every once in a while I get direct messages from community members sharing with me the way that they've been impacted, right? And I really appreciate it. And sometimes I just reply with, hey, thank you for sharing. But I normally take those and I'll share them with my wife, or I'll save them somewhere. I'll share them with my leadership team. But I got people saying, you can go on LinkedIn, right? Hey, maybe we should come up with a hashtag for 2023 so that we can filter through this easier. But you can go on LinkedIn and look at the IBMers. And they're saying,
a new idea sparked by Alan on the Voces podcast. That's awesome.
But we have
so
someone.
That's your mission. Come back with ideas for a hashtag. But thank you, Alan. I'm going to end it here. I mean, it's been amazing to talk to you. You're so inspirational, and I love the last words that you left us with. Our stories. That's what we came in with. That's what we have. That's what we have to hold on to. So thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. I really appreciate it. And of course, your community loves you. We love you. Thank you again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Voces. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify channels. You can find us as Voces so you don't miss any new episodes.